Hey, what's up? It's Jake, and I'm learning Kubernetes. So I just finished going over the complete application setup with Kubernetes components on the Tech World with Nana YouTube channel, and that is video 21 on the Docker and Kubernetes tutorial for beginners. So I finished the homework, and we're ready to go jump into this. One neat thing I learned to begin is that you can do a kubectl get all, and I don't need to look for my deployments and my pods and my services and all that stuff separately. I can just look at everything. And an alias, that's just k get all, which is a super fast way to do that. So that's definitely going to speed me up. So let's start from the beginning. First, you need to start up your Minikube cluster. Next, we need to create our database. So I have a file here called mongo.yaml, and it's mad because I didn't put any resource limits, but we'll just ignore that for now. And it's a simple file with a couple slight changes. So the best way to do this is to start out by just doing from the command line, a kubectl create deployment tests, for example, test.yaml, and then dash dash image equals, in this case, I'm going to use Mongo, and then I will just do an out YAML to a test.yaml file. Let me change the name of this. That's not correct. All right, and then you'll have a test.yaml file that you can edit. So that's what I did. I started with this, and I just started taking stuff out. And what I ended up with was this mongo.yaml file. And it's basically the same thing as the Tech World with Nana GitHub repository. So watch that video number 21. Go to Nana's GitHub repo, get the code from there. I'm not going to duplicate it. Definitely want to give that creator credit where credit is due. So here are the customizations. There's some environment variables for the username and the password. And what we did was we created secrets. So I finally understand how secrets and ConfigMap work. So I created a secrets file, and I just base64 encoded a username and a password, stuck them in here, and then a kubectl apply the secrets. That's exactly what we're going to do next. kubectl apply-f mongo secret. So now my secret is created. Now that my secret is created, this file will actually have some values to reference, so we can create this as well. kubectl apply-f mongo.yaml. And now we have our deployment, and there's an internal service running here as well. So we have the service running, and we have the deployment running. What I learned from Nana was that you never really run the deployment and the service separate. They're always together. So you can use these three tick marks or like minus symbols to start a new YAML file and basically have two specifications inside one YAML file and put the deployment and the service together. So that's a neat pattern. I've never seen that before. All right, so now if we do a kget all and I look at my resources, I've got the MongoDB pod running. I've got the MongoDB service internally running on port 27017. We can see here that it's all under our deployment, which obviously has a replica set. So we're looking good. Next thing up, we're going to cover the Express. So we want to hit this front end, MongoDB Express, and then be able to communicate with the backend. So this is our backend API to our database. So this is just a typical deployment file. You can create one just like I did before. I didn't use the dry run flag, so I did have to go back and delete that test deployment. So make sure you use the dry run equals client flag. So in here, again, we use the secrets for the username and password. But this time we're actually going to use something else, and that's a ConfigMap key. So ConfigMap is basically a file full of variables. That's all it is. They're available globally throughout Kubernetes, so you can reference them. All you need to do is use the value from ConfigMap key ref, and then give the name of the file, and then the key. So I'll show you what that looks like. So in the ConfigMap, mongo-configmap is the name of my file. And if you look at the data, database URL is my key. So if we go back to Express, you can see here, I said, here's the name of the file, here's the key, read the data, and it's going to read this data. And all I did was point the database URL to the service. So it's all the traffic trying to hit the database is actually going to go to the service for the database, and the service, which is an internal load balancer basically, is going to route that traffic to the pod that has the database. Hopefully that makes sense. Nana does a great job explaining it with visuals, so I highly recommend going and watching this video. It was very, very good for me. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and make this config map. K apply-f mongo-config-map. And once the config map is created, the values are there for the database URL, so we can go ahead and create the express pod and deployment as well. K apply-f mongo express. Now, the one thing I didn't mention is that there's a service, and it's a type load balancer for the Mongo Express deployment, and this service is external. So essentially what happens is you go to your browser, right, and you put in a URL like localhost on port, in this case 8081, or in this case 30,000, because the node port range is up in the 30,000s. And so you have to go in that range. So you go to localhost port 30,000. The request goes from your localhost, like that's hosted on the node, right? It's because my laptop or my computer is the node. And Minikube is like my node, really. Then what happens is that request goes to the external facing load balancer on port 8081, and it's going to do a target to go to the Mongo Express pod on port 8081. That's the target port here on line 51. And once it hits that, Mongo Express is going to pass that request to the database URL, which we define in ConfigMap, which is going to the internal service for MongoDB. And MongoDB's internal service, if we go take a look at that, is listening on port 27017, which is going to forward traffic to the target port of the Mongo database node, pod on port 27017, and then ultimately authenticate with the secrets that we've defined here once that request gets down to the database. Hopefully that makes sense. So that's kind of like the front to back end. So if you're running Minikube, which you probably are, you need to expose the service. So you have to actually say, I have an external service, Minikube make a service. So really quick, I can just do like a kubectl get services and see I have a Mongo Express service. So I'm just going to copy this and say, hey Minikube, make an external service and point it to Mongo Express. And Minikube is going to give me a URL. It's going to open on localhost. It's going to give me a port, and you need an admin and a password. I'm going to cancel this so I can show you where to get that. So if you want the username and password, what you have to do is you have to do a k get pods, copy the name of the pod, and just do a k logs. And we can see here, Mongo server is now listening. It was trying to connect, and then it finally connected. Basic auth credentials are admin pass. Okay, cool. We got it. So now we can do that service again. It's going to open a URL. I can use the admin user with the password of pass, sign in, and there we go. We can create ourselves like a test database. Here's our test database, and we're doing stuff. And so all these requests that I'm doing right now very quickly are just going through that process of going through all the different services and pods and all this other stuff and checking authentication and checking the database URL. It's just doing it very, very fast. So this is a super fun project. I had a great time with it. I'm going to try to take this and modify my own application and see if I can't get that running. And if I can, that'll be awesome, and I'll share that with you. And if I get stuck, I'm just going to move on to the next thing. So this is the end of part 0. If you've made it this far, congratulations. I now consider myself a level 0 Kubernetes administrator. Hopefully you're having a great time. I'm having a blast. If you have any questions, let me know. But if not, my name's Jake from Nimbus DevOps, and I am learning Kubernetes.